I'm not on Zoom, Lindsay, so. Ready? Okay. Okay, let's get going then. We're going to have a different meeting tonight in cooperation with the title of Larry's presentation here. We're going to have an Unchained meeting, a little bit different. Larry is going to be with us via Zoom, mainly for the Q&A session. I'll introduce him here in just a minute, and he'll be on screen. But most of the meeting is going to be a pre-recorded interview that Brenda Pennick did with him. We recorded this last week because Brenda can't be here tonight. I think most of you are aware of the changes that we've had in the leadership team on the of the Booth Art Guild. Brenda and I are the officers now of the leadership team, and one of the changes that we're going to be making is to operate with more committees, and we'll get more of our members involved in some of the different activities that we have going on with the Booth Artists Guild. So this is going to be a different type of meeting than what we normally have. Tonight, Larry Moore, I think most of you probably know of him. He's the author of the book Fishing for Elephants, and I'll show you a copy of that in just a minute when we introduce him. But I think he's here. Yeah, there he is. Okay, just in time, Larry. Yeah, Larry. I don't know if, I don't guess, Lindsay, are you set up so you can put this on the camera? We're ad-libbing here. There we go. This is his book, Fishing for Elephants. And it's quite a good book. It's the kind of book that you can't just read through, you actually have to study it, I think.
Do they have it in the shop?
I don't think we have it in the shop yet. It's available on Amazon. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Larry has had an illustrious career for over 50 years now. He terms himself as being a visual communicator. He began in the world of the surf industry. Of all things, primarily painting murals and designing clothing for the surf industry. I don't know if he knows Drew Brophy or not, but Drew Brophy was or is an artist who actually paints surfboards, and very good at it. He does a lot, so I bet Larry probably knows him. Over the year, he's transitioned into graphic design, advertising, illustration, and fine art, and has gained national acclaim in each of these realms of visual communications. Since 1990, he's been working as a college and workshop instructor.
You're echoing really bad. You've got two of you talking. You are talking twice.
Yeah, I don't know what to do about it. Okay, since 1990, he's been working as a college and workshop instructor, and now he's extended beyond just the teaching to actually writing books. And tonight, during the video recording, we're going to be hearing a little bit about a new book that he's working on. Matter of fact, the material that he's going to be going through tonight is going to be covered in his new book. He's still working on it, and hasn't even gotten a title yet. So, but we'll hear more about that in the video. For some awards that he's gotten with his art, he's gotten a number of plein air best of shows, best in several different categories, Artists and Collectors Choice Awards, and all over the country. He's been with the Art Renewal Center in 2023. In the Society of Illustrators in 2005, he won the gold medal. And again in the Society of Illustrators, he was in their annual exhibit in 1995 and 1997 through 2005. He's also been in Communication Arts Illustration and Design Annuals from 1999 to 2008. So he's quite accomplished with his art and is very good at teaching us how to be creative. If you paid attention to the slides that were being shown before the meeting, you see how creative he can be with some of his art. He also does a lot of abstract art as well.
What medium does he work in?
He works in quite a few mediums. My understanding is acrylics, watercolor, oil, that sort of thing. That's a good question to ask him when we get to the Q&A session. The plan for the meeting is we're going to show the video now, and then after that, that should finish up around 7 or a little bit after there. We're going to have a Q&A session. And you can ask him that question directly as well as anything else that comes up. So with that, Lindsay, I think we're ready to play the video. Do you have anything to add to that, Larry? Or anything you want to say?
No, you're making me sound pretty good. I like it.
No, I guess not. Okay. Lindsay, if we can go ahead and roll that video and play the video, that'll get us going.
Has he had a show here?
Larry Moore. Hello.
Brenda. Hi.
Hey, so
How
good
are
to
you?
see you again.
Great to be
Hey,
seen.
last time you visited the members of the Booth Artist Guild, it was during COVID. It was also on Zoom, and we had a great presentation. We talked about your book, which I love. Whoops, I think my camera's not getting a good read here.
There you go. Yeah.
Fishing for Elephants. There we go.
Yes.
And you can see I've got lots of pages marked, and I've got all kinds of things highlighted, and I've been through it twice, and still love it. I still get everything. Every time I open it up, there's something new that I see that I don't remember seeing before, and it's coincidentally seems to be exactly what I need to hear. But
Yeah.
no, you're going to talk about a variety of things today in this presentation. So go.
Yeah. Well, and some of the stuff I'm going to talk about is going to be in the next book, which I'm working on. So
Hey.
somehow I thought when I finished that first book that was it, did it. That was 3 years out of my life. And then, no, that wasn't it. So yeah, I'm expounding because I realized some of the stuff we're talking about today, I didn't get into the first book. It came to me sort of after. It's a simpler way of thinking about design. And which is what we're going to talk about, right?
Great. Awesome.
Yeah. Because while I'm doing this, you and I can chit chat. Let me do this part here.
Sure. I ran into you at the Plein Air Convention
Yes.
a couple weeks back, and we talked a little bit about our common design backgrounds. And
Yes.
I shared with you one of the challenges that I faced when I left design and came into fine art was there was a whole change in my mindset, and you knew exactly what I was talking about when I said that
Yes.
I struggled with letting go of the fear of and I still struggle with that. Somehow when I went from design to fine art, it became more precious.
Right.
Fear sets in. So I think you're going to maybe talk a little bit about that today. So I'm going to be quiet.
Yeah.
Begin.
Yeah. Well, you and I, we chime in because you and I had this great conversation about the similarities of our paths. And I had, my background was in graphic design, as your background was. And you may still be doing it. I don't know. I still do some here and there, but just for fun projects.
Mhm.
But so the way we learn design is not the normal channels of how people learn design and painting. And so that's kind of the thing we're going to be talking about. And what my goal is to help people look at it a different way. But yeah, the thing that you and I went through that was so interesting is in my world as a designer and illustrator, it was my job to be different, to be like super out of the box, come up with a new way of doing things every single time. And then I got into the world of plein air and I'm looking around going, well, everybody's painting a certain way. And I didn't even, it wasn't even conscious. I just started painting like everybody else. And
Right.
doing the job, I was getting nice sort of representations of things, but I just wasn't really inserting myself into it, which is when
Mhm.
I started writing the book. I'm like, why? It's time to explore this idea further. But I've been teaching for 35 years. I've been teaching. I started teaching college level and in workshops, and I started seeing a lot of issues with this idea of design. And so that's what we're going to be talking about a little tiny old bit. And the thing that I'm gonna call design unchained.
Yeah.
And it's just a different. It's really thinking kind of more like a graphic designer rather than like a painter, if that makes sense. And but ultimately, this is the same thing. So, shall we?
Let's do it.
Okay. And I got examples. I got pictures. You may recognize this. This is from the great composition and outdoor painting. Edgar.
Absolutely.
And I love these, and they're wonderful teaching tools because you get to see different models or templates for how to think about composition. But there's an inherent problem in the models and the stuff that people give you, the absolutes, right? And so,
Right.
as good as this is, there's an inherent problem in it, and I'll get to that in a second. So the problem is we're given, and I see this all the time in my classes. People will come to me and say, I'm worried about this particular issue, and like an entry point and an exit point. And I'm like, well, where did you hear that from? I mentioned this at the PACE thing, and that's just one example of every one of these things. Center of interest, rule of thirds, nothing dead center. These are all like stuff that's been handed out in a workshop. Now, I'm not saying, and for all of you listening, these aren't bad things. The thing is, they're not commandments. They're not absolutes. And at some point, they're great for beginner and intermediate level of understanding interesting composition. But at some point, they start getting in the way of intuitive thought, right? This is a painting by a guy named Giorgio Morandi. Maybe you've heard of him, maybe you haven't. And maybe in some level, you're thinking, well, I don't get what the big deal is. Well, you'd have to look at his entire body of work and how the point of me showing you this is all those rules I just said that you're not supposed to do, he does or did. And he's hanging in all the museums in the country.
Yeah,
So,
I see the tangent, I see equal spacing,
yeah,
I see all kinds of things that, yeah, I mean, those are the rules that we're taught.
yeah.
Hmm.
So the thing with those rules, they get in the way of intuitive thought, and I think they subvert the intuitive response. They subvert the self. But I will say this for sure: you need to know them before you. And it's an old saying: you need to know the rules before you can break them.
Absolutely.
And I don't know why that is, but if you decide to break them ahead of time, it doesn't work. So anyway, I thought of like, well, what's a better way to explain this? And this is why I'm writing my next book, is because I started analyzing paintings and all these things that people said, well, you should never, you should always. Most of the paintings that I've been drawn to, all those shoulds and all those shouldn'ts, they just did, right? This is Andrew Wyeth.
Yeah.
And those general sort of rules, he breaks them all, right? But how does he do it so beautifully and so well? That's the question, right?
So
So what do you got?
visual energy.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. So what I've got here, we're going to ignore these other things for now. I'm going to talk about these three things, which are central to graphic design, right? What's the point of graphic design? It's to move your eye through a space and to deliver information in a kind of an order.
Mm-hmm.
So there's three principles. And now I refer to that first thing of eye flow, which is what we're talking about. And I want you in the listening, all of you, from now on, when you look at a painting, and this is a kind of a part of what I was talking about at Pace, when you look at a painting, feel your eyes move through the space. And the really good paintings, ask yourself, where do you pay attention to where it goes first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, whatever. The problem with something like center of interest, for example,
Yes.
it gates the rest of the painting. It doesn't account for what is happening outside of the thing that you're supposed to look at essentially first. So when we look at this painting by Andrew Wyeth, what is the center of interest? Is it the guy's head? I mean, there's a psychological tendency to be drawn to that first, sure. But is that the center of interest? If we look at it in terms of where's my eye going in the painting? And so can you see my cursor here?
Yes.
Okay. So we're drawn to the head maybe first, but also look at the weight. This is visual energy, right? This is a huge area of great contrast. White against black. You don't get any more contrast. Hard edge, right?
Right.
Is that an accident?
No.
No. So, and then the light's raking across the sleeve. Well, that's not an accident either. And then there's a little light thumbnail thing. Well, that's not an accident either. And then he's got these pairs of scissors. What are those doing there? And so these are all, you might consider them points of interest, but they all go towards some storyline. So the visual energy is there's a psychological energy in the face. We're just drawn to it. That's just a given. If there's a figure in a Thomas Moran painting, you're going to find it, right?
Yeah, right.
But beyond that, so we have these other points that are pulling us. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And all that is these other points of interest that keep us engaged in the painting. So that's the visual energy quotient. So we control the hierarchy, where we go first, second, and third by controlling how much weight each piece has. But there's this other term that I refer to as variation. Now, you may have heard of it in past, repetition with variety, right?
Right.
But I've come to realize it's in every single decision of every great painting, this concept of variation. Now, there's exceptions. There's always an exception to every rule, but we won't get into that right now. But here's where it shows up. And I learned this from analyzing Richard Diebenkorn, and you're familiar. Great designer. And I've got a Diebenkorn painting in here. And I kept thinking, well, he does representational work and his Bay Area figurative stuff, and he also does abstract stuff, and they're all good. They're all compelling designs. What was similar? And I found that when you look at it, he has this intuitive, as Andrew Wyeth does the same thing, how they divide up the space, right? So there's a variation in that measure, to this measure, to that measure, to that measure, to that measure. There's a variation in this light to that light, to this light, to that light. They're all different, right? So the concept of variation is nothing repeats identically. That's the concept of variation. I'm going to show you more of that as we move through. You ready? What do you think so far?
I'm sorry?
What do you think so far? You with me?
Yeah, this is making perfect sense. I mean, every variety and everything. Absolutely. And that's what keeps it interesting. It keeps it from getting boring.
Well, and when you're a beginner painter, I don't know the viewing audience, I don't know where you are in your journey, but I know I've taught enough beginning plein air, intermediate plein air classes where you have the petters, the people who just tap.
Yep.
And that pattern of the same stroke everywhere there's no variation in it. So I've learned just in my brush work, every brush mark I make isn't repeated identically unless there's a good reason to have it, right?
I strive for that as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is easy, especially when you feel yourself getting tired towards the end and it's about time to wrap it up and you've just got a little bit more to go. It's easy. You kind of put it on overdrive and you don't think, but intentional brush work, I think, is something that really creates interest in a painting.
So this is the great illustrator, Dean Cornwell. And first of all, from a design standpoint, where's the variation, right? Well, let's back it up there to eye flow, right? Everyone out there looking at this painting, I've got a color version coming up in just a second. Look at how the black and white works. It works great just by itself because he's varying the value structures through that space. He doesn't have the exact same value structures in anything, really. If this is the lightest light, that's maybe the second lightest light, and here too, but it's a smaller volume, if that makes sense. And then that's a light too, but it's not as light as that light. And then he steps it down as you move through paintings. It's a little darker, that's a little still, that's darker still. So he's varying the value structure. But now let's add in the color, right? He does the same
Right.
thing color. Now look at the measures of everything. What do you got?
Yeah.
Yeah. So where's my arrow? So that's one measure. That's a different measure. That's a different measure. That's a different measure. You see it happening?
Yep.
This shape, that shape, this shape, that shape. Every space of this is either by design or intuitively by design calculated to be unique, to have its own identity.
Yeah.
That's part of what makes a composition compelling. It isn't that everything's placed on the thirds or that you're using the Fibonacci numbers, so forth. Now, here's how he uses color. Now, I love this painting because A, it's friggin' awesome, but B, it's so well crafted and designed. The shadow shapes. So the
Beautiful.
contour variation, how do you make an interesting cloud? Variation. If you go out and look at clouds, and you'll see Mother Nature does not repeat any aspect of the cloud
Right.
identically, right?
Right.
How do you make a beautiful rock? Variation. Every side of that rock is going to have a different quality to it. That's how you make up interesting rocks. So anyway, color-wise. So your eye may go here first because that's a natural inclination, the psychological weight of the face. We're going to go there, but that carries a lot of weight, this little white page, because it's the greatest area of contrast. It's the lightest light. So you go bam, bam. And then you may go to here because that's bright red. But I want you to notice this about the reds. So none of the reds repeat identically. There's a tendency. We get a red on our brush, and well, I'll just put it everywhere. Well, why this works so well is that's one kind of red. That's a different kind of red. This is another kind of red, and that's another kind of red.
Variation in chroma and in temperature.
Yep. And so whenever you find yourself locked into a big painting, beyond the initial sort of blush of what the thing is, this is the stuff that keeps your eye spinning around because you're finding all these sub patterns. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And Larry, I noticed one thing. I mean, I'm looking, my first thought was, look at how close that center of interest, I mean, the greatest value contrast with the page and then her black dress. Look how close that is to dead center. I mean, it's pretty darn close, isn't it?
It's close. And it could be like you can put stuff dead center. There's nothing wrong with that. I've seen a painting. I just was thinking on the way over here of a painting I saw in a big show by I don't remember. It was just a slice of watermelon on a white background. It was so beautifully painted. I did not think at all about, well, why is that in the middle? Right? It's just beautifully painted.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So yeah, you can put stuff dead center. It just if you want the eye to stay in the space, you got to move your eye through that space. So there's these points of interest. Where we go. You see it?
Active patterning back on the, like where you just put one of the dots.
Yeah.
On the jug, on the pottery.
Yeah. And so he's using all these different techniques, methods, characteristics maybe, to keep your eye engaged in that space, to tell the story, rather than duplicating anything identically. So here's another visual explanation. I've got two visuals to explain it. And this is the thing that I like to invent these little challenges, and I post them on What If University, on Facebook. This is a variation challenge. And so this is a grid, and it's not like a rule of thirds grid, but I suppose you could consider it to be that. But it's not the intended thing. It's just this number one here, where's my arrow? Number one here is a symmetrical depiction of a thing, right? It's not interesting. But if the number two space here, I've varied one thing, which is the negative space. I've just moved them apart so no line is equal from the distant to the other. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And so now it's a little more visually compelling. And then the third one is I'm adding in another element of scale and maybe edges of things. So I'm changing the characteristics of the line, and I still have 6 lines, I think. I haven't counted them, but you get the idea. Now it gets even more interesting because I'm varying more properties of each part. It makes sense?
Yeah. Yes.
And as I progress along, okay, well, now I can add in more organic lines. And this is why I love abstract art, by the way, because design is just laid bare. There's
Yeah,
just, it's nothing but design. And
yeah.
that's what people, that's why I teach what I teach is if you can compose space with just non-objective parts, then you're going to be a much better at rocks and clouds and trees and stuff, right?
I agree.
So all these things are just, this is a progression of adding different components and seeing where it goes. So that's the idea of variation. Well, where does it show up in this painting? By the way, this is a Diebenkorn painting, one of my all-time faves. And he's all those things, all those rules, don't ever paint with black, nothing on a tangent. He's got all sorts of tangents going on in there. And yet, um, it's a good painting. Well, why? Because it defies all these other models of what we think is a good painting, but that's the entire point. That's what art should do anyway.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
mean, to me, he's the penultimate designer. Everything he does is really good because he knows how to divide up space, right? He knows how to do all these. I love the quirky weirdness to this painting of having that chair back right up against that line and having
Right. And we're going right
yeah,
off the bottom edge.
yeah.
And
Who would
and I'm seeing such a interesting variety of shapes, everything from those tiny little windows to
yes.
the long shapes to the narrow uprights. Beautiful.
Well, and here's the thing about look at those little windows. None of them repeat identically.
No,
They
no.
it's called repetition. Repetition with variety, or I like to call it resonating, right? So look at the orange in the middle. I mean, you
Yeah,
can't miss the orange in the middle. He's resonating, repeating it with variations through space. You see that?
yeah.
Yeah. So, and he does the same thing with the blues. This blue, that blue, that
Different.
blue, that blue, that blue. They connect with each other, but they don't repeat, right?
They sure don't.
They don't. And so here's another example I show in all my classes. On the left is just a simple pattern, polka dots, right? Not interesting unless it's a skirt, scarf. Um, Even wallpaper would be tough to have that as wallpaper, but
Mhm.
it's just flat space, right? That's all it is. Now I've varied like three things on the right, and I've changed the visual energy of each piece. So polka dots, I'm changing the mass or the scale, right? How big they are. I'm changing the color value relationships, and I'm changing the
Mhm.
edges of things.
Yeah.
So it takes a very uninteresting thing. Those three changes make it more interesting. And you could see how this can relate to any painting, really, because
Oh yeah.
any painting of subject or subjects is just is shapes in a space, right? And that's all this is. And it's just showing you how this idea works of variation. And the trick is just to not repeat things. This is and another term for variation might be unequal distribution. It's
Yeah.
that's like a tongue twister to me, but that's what it is. Um, this is the great Scott Christensen, and I've been with him, painting and hanging out, and he can make these things up out of his head because he's painted the landscape so much. But what he knows is the variation concept for compositional purposes and also for descriptive purposes. Like, again, how do you make an interesting rock? You vary every angle and side of that rock. Maynard Dixon did it too, George O'Keeffe, all the great designers. The clouds, no shape repeats
Mhm.
identically, right? They relate to each other as siblings, but they're not the same.
And look at all those upright trees. I mean, every single one, every single shape is different.
That's right. And one of the big tricks. Compositionally, this space here is different from this space here, is different from that space, is different from that space, is different from every one of these masses of the rocks. This is why he can make up rock. He just makes this stuff up because he knows them so well, but he knows how to design. And this is
Yeah.
kind of, this is an Edgar Payne model, but he doesn't need the Edgar Payne model anymore because he knows how to vary things through.
Right.
And so, but also in this little non-objective painting here at the bottom, not little, it's actually quite big. It's about a 50 by 50. And it's a painting, believe it or not, of this little harbor in Rockland. And I saw it at the Farnsworth. And I was just looking at it going, why is that so good to me? And it's because look at this, like the black linear movements. They relate to one another, but they don't repeat. The reds, they're not the same. He changes them throughout that space. And so, and edges, he's varying the edges through space. And it doesn't take much to imagine, like, this is actually, if you know the scene, this is actually in the distance is the DuPont seaweed plant. I don't know what they're making seaweed with that for, and these are like pilings in the foreground. So once you understand what you're looking at, in a sense, it's like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing. You know, you don't have to know. But so he's creating, both paintings are doing the exact same thing, just like graphic design, to move your eye through that space. And it's a much simpler way than relying on a template. So you and I talked about this idea the other day, and I did this thing years ago called decomposing Hopper, right? Because I just thought it's such a funny term.
I love this.
And I thought a great thing to do would be, no, I'm not going to decompose this one, but the next two I will. But he's such a great designer. Why? Because he knows this concept of variation. Once you see it in his work, you'll see it in everybody's work. But it's pronounced in his work. How he repeats shapes or colors. Like, look at the red through this space, right? Similar reds through space, but different. Look at the yellows. Similar yellows through that space, but different. And so there's this, you just have to force your tendencies to go, okay, this yellow works here, so it'll sure work over here, right? Just pay attention to those tendencies. And he does this thing with shapes. These shapes repeat. Now, obviously, they're designed to repeat, but that's part of the charm of this sort of these warm tones. And these warm tones connect your eye, boom, right?
Right.
Hey, stop that. Okay. So what it's seemingly a simple construct, and an unusual one too, by the way, how he's dividing up the space and placing the woman over there in this thoughtful, pensive pose, tells this huge story. Why is he not watching the film? Kind of a thing.
And why are we seeing that the light on that one gentleman's head?
Yes, that's
theater?
right.
That's an important part of this.
Yes. And to take what you just said further, every time you look at a Hopper painting, know that every single decision that he has made is on purpose. It's there for a reason. Like this thing. Why is that there?
Right.
It occupies the space. It gives your eye something to hang on to involve you into the space. And you can feel the triangle. Where are we going to go first? Here for sure. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe over to here, down to here. Oh, what's that thing? Hey, look, that blue and this blue. Right?
Right.
And then you start seeing color relationships everywhere. And then you're locked in.
I feel like that the railing that we're looking at the bottom is a good example of point force.
Ooh, I like that term. Tell me.
Yeah, point force. Well, it's one of the forces, centrifugal force, or ways to design a page. And point force is like almost literally like using arrows, and it kind of acts as an arrow pointing us from her eyes gazing down towards in that direction. Then we land over on the railing with the light, that little bit of light hitting it, and it's like an arrow pointing us right to the man's head, and then up to the design.
Yeah. So that's a great observation. I didn't even see that until now, but you're right. Her face, she's looking down. Where's your eye go? You're going to follow her gaze, like in that first Andrew Wyeth painting I showed you. And then this thing here, it's a pointer to that thing. And so are these, by the way. These things are pointing down to this dude. Obviously, they're married, right? And he's probably, he's a guy, so he did something stupid, and she's pissed, right?
Yeah.
So he's giving you all of this in a very seemingly simple construct. It's not. It's very well crafted.
It's amazing.
So here's one of my favorite paintings by him, because it's such a weird painting. And the thing I love about it is, where does your eye want to go? It wants to go.
Yeah.
I got to go into that space because the tracks, I can't, it's a gravitational force, but it won't. Why? Because the weight of this thing, and also the weight of that thing, right?
Yeah.
So keep an eye on this stuff, because I'm going to change it so you can see what happens when you change visual energy, right? Boom.
Okay.
You see what I just did?
Wow. Yeah.
So you back up. There it is before.
Wow.
Here's the after.
That's amazing.
So now that's kind of just two paintings. They're not really connected by anything, except here, the visual weight, that's the concept of visual energy. The visual weight of that red is powerful. The visual weight of these guys, because it's an area of contrast. And then the visual weight of this thing because of its mass, its value, and the lines all pointing to that space. Your eye is going, I don't know where to be. I don't know where to go. Well, help me, help me. You know? All right, here's one more.
Yeah.
So this one I call Mondrian's apartment. I really, I swear to God, I think it's a nod to Mondrian because
I
it's
love
just
it.
wonderfully graphic. What?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look at that. Wow.
And, you know, again, with Hopper, like he really sketched these things out and he would work them out in comp form as we all did back in the day before the advent of digital, right?
Right.
We
Right.
markers and
Yep.
markers and
Yep.
just work it out. And so, number one, what are the variations? What do you see? You tell me.
Well, the division of space is the first thing that comes to mind.
That's right. Division of space.
Yeah, yeah. The big white space is so important in this piece, and we've got this nice repetition of these uprights, but
Yep.
each one is different. They're a variety of color, a variety of sizes,
Right.
and even the fact that the one is a curtain. It's not a flat shape. It's obviously a dimensional
Yep.
shape. And then the strong side of the bed or sofa, whatever that is, going in it at angles, bring us right into that composition. Man, that's beautiful.
And so and you were dead on with all that. So, but here's how, like, repetition with variety. This yellow is repeated down in here, but not identically. It's also referenced here.
Yeah.
The reds you mentioned, red, but they're all different. Now, here's another cool thing. It's the battle of geometric shapes versus curves.
Yes.
You
Yes.
think this weird helmet? I think this is how she forms her hair. I don't know what I think it's a helmet, but why the heck is that there?
Yeah.
It's there to reference
Sure.
the shape through space, right? Your eye, you don't even see this stuff consciously until you start seeing it and you go, oh, I see what you did.
Yeah.
Clever,
Yeah.
clever boy. So now I'm going to mess with it and just take out like all the upright stuff, right? The things that move your eye,
Mm.
right? All the
Right.
stuff that keeps your eye engaged in the entire frame, I take them out. And so
Yeah.
now it's not terrible. It's actually hard to mess up a Hopper painting because he's so good at it, but
But it certainly changes it.
it does change it. It throws the balance off by not
Yeah.
having those reference points. So here's some quick examples. I don't know. I have no idea how we're doing on time. But I've got one of my paintings in here and maybe one or two, but
Okay, great.
other paintings. So I used to share a space with 20 artists and I became really interested in the artists' spaces themselves because it's an extension in every way of the individual. So I set up and painted this on location over a period of 3 or 4 days. And of course, this crazy, messy person, everything changed, everything moved around. And but I always loved this battle of pattern. I just was a favorite thing of mine. And so, but there's variation in the pattern. So there's a lot of crazy pattern here. There's a different kind of pattern here, but it's not which one has more weight. Well, that one does. And these are secondary. And then these are tertiary, right? So pattern, pattern. But look at also the reds. Red,
Yeah.
red. All different reds. And this is, I don't know what year this was, 2013. This is before I actually knew what I was doing. I knew what I was doing. I just didn't have a term for it, right?
Let's see. Yeah.
And so, and if you have all this crazy mess, another kind of variation is to bring in an opposing concept. So if you have a lot of pattern, it's nice to have an area of no pattern, right? Pattern versus rest, light versus dark, warm versus cool.
Right. Yeah.
So there's that. That's a variation. Ray Roberts, if you want to know great shape making, what's the key to making great rocks, which are shapes, is variation, right? Where does it show up? Every shadow shape is different, right?
Every single one. Every single one.
And they're connected by a color theme, but they're still different. And the light shapes as well, right? He doesn't repeat anything twice. He's got this really great little quirky, intense green here and that awesome blue with I think it's a TP or a person. I don't know what it is. Little tiny decisions. Are these on accident? No. It's very well thought through, right? At first glance, you go, God, that's good. Why is it so good? Because he knows how to manage shape and variation in shape.
That's wonderful.
Mr. Klimt, The
Yeah.
great. Now, I mentioned in Pace, I just saw a show of his work, and that painting on the left was in that show of his landscapes. And his early work, he was a classically trained artist. He could draw lights out. Obviously, he chose not to utilize that skill set and to take it into a more stylistic direction.
Mm-hmm.
Key to his constructs is that, number one, he's not drawing a tree. He's drawing his version of the tree. And to make them interesting, he's just varying the shapes. This big, weird throw rug of a tree just has enough variation in it to make it interesting, as does every chunk of that space. Every space, every shape space is different, and the patterns in each of the shape spaces are also different. That's variation. So you start seeing, once you see it, you can't unsee it. I hope, right? I had to
Right.
throw this one in. The great story with Orson Welles. He directed this at 24,
No
and people
kidding.
asked him in an interview why it was so good, and he goes, "Well, I didn't know what the rules were." So I'm like,
Wow.
"Well, that's a
Wow.
great." But look at, variation will certainly come into like the distance between things, right, and the value
Right.
structure of things. But it's beyond that. It's his ability to compose a picture is was, he had the cinematographer involved, of course, too, whom he trusted implicitly. But still, like even
Yeah.
that light value there and that light value there,
It's
they're
perfect.
resonating through that space in this gorgeous black and white way. Joe Paquette,
Oh,
uh, it's a love-hate thing. I love him because he's a good guy, and I hate him because he's such a good painter.
I know, right?
But I was there for this event. I participated in this Laguna
Oh,
Invitational event,
Laguna. Yeah.
and he won with this, as he should have.
Oh, man.
But it's so great that the variation concept. Where does that show up? The angles of all these lines. They're
Those
all
are everywhere. Yeah.
measured weight of every single line. It's so well crafted. It's almost impossible to believe that it was done on site.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's
That's
beautiful.
it's an incredible painting.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
like variation shows up when you're painting flowers and masses of stuff to just
You know,
vary,
yeah, I think
polka
this
dot.
is such a great example of seeing and finding beauty. It's not what you paint, it's how you paint it.
Yeah, it's how
And
you do it.
oh,
Yeah.
this is the scene that so many people, myself included, probably would walk right on past and go, "Oh,
Yeah.
there's here to paint." But look at what
Yeah.
he did with it. And
And I
even
wonder,
the green in the bushes up on the hill,
yeah.
you know, the variation of the edges of
Yes.
those bushes. You know,
This
we
green, that green, this green, that
yeah,
green, they're all different greens.
they're all different.
So you see it, right? Now you see it, you can't unsee it, and it'll
Right.
help you and the viewing audience
Yeah.
to push your work. Oh, here's two more painted from life. I used to love to go into antique stores and ask them if I could paint in there, and they would always say no. But once in a while, you get a yes.
Uh-huh.
And so I would go in because I love trying to make sense out of chaos. Loved it.
Yeah.
And so these are both painted
So,
on site back when I was doing the plein air thing. And but you have to make choices in how you manage the visual energy, or it turns into pure chaos with these things. Like I would play down that plate, and all the information in here is only a suggestion. So I'm not giving you too much across the board, and I'm controlling the amount of what's the visual energy of each piece. And then, just for good measure, to keep from getting crazy pants, is this flat space and that flat space.
those nice quiet
And
spots.
quiet zones, yeah.
Yeah.
With the great composer who said, too much variation is chaos, and too little is boring, right? And
Yeah, it's finding that balance. Beautiful. I remember the first time I saw you post it was probably your first antique shop that you painted. And I was scrolling through Facebook, and it just stopped me in my tracks and said, whoa, how that's amazing. You know, just the boldness of it, just to take on such a challenge. I mean, to me, it's like the ultimate jigsaw puzzle.
It is. But
I still remember seeing that and how I felt when I saw that.
The way I would start with that would be like, I love going out and painting the California coastline, but it's the same way of starting is you mass in a shape relationships, but you make sure that there's variation in the initial shape relationships, right? In the value
Right.
relationship.
Yeah.
So once you understand the principle, and this is, I think, the last one. This is a guy, Brian Rubenberg, and I think I showed this one in my PACE show. And the thing I
Yeah.
always love about him is you can see where he's coming from, but it's not, which is trees and landscape, but it's not about that. It's
Mm-mm.
about thing. It's about color relationships. It's about paint.
Mhm.
And he
Mhm.
tends to work large and he uses a lot of paint, but you can see the concept of variation and visual energy uh, much better in non-objective pieces and pieces that are highly, highly stylized because we're not glued to how well or badly something is
Yeah.
painted, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you realize how important that every note is. Like that's a dominant piece of the puzzle. That's a dominant piece of the puzzle. This pattern over here is dominant because A,
Mhm.
it's not everywhere. So these flat spaces are there to support all these pattern spaces. That pattern space is different from that pattern space. The reds, as they move through that space, it's all different stuff. That's variation, right? So it's rather than thinking about templates, and it's great to practice this stuff in just black and white. So your brain's not exploding with
Yeah. Right.
all of it at once, right? So
Right.
I'm going to end it here. It's a great painting by NC Wyeth, of course. The ultimate. All right, stop share. Boink. Here we go.
Okay.
That was a lot.
Fascinating. That was a
Marathon.
lot, but boy, that's eye-opening. I mean, it's stuff that, I kind of know from the background, but to hear you explain it, that was wonderful, Larry. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Just
Yeah, and this is stuff that you and I both know inherently because that was our job,
yeah.
right? But for the
Yeah.
people coming up in the painting world and they're getting handed all these like shoulds and shouldn'ts, I'm just here to tell you it's great to consider them, but they're not laws of the universe at all.
Yeah.
And most of them I only find happening once or twice or three times in the
Yeah.
history of art, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But they're good guidelines, but they're not commandments. So as long as
Right.
you want to make a
Right.
compelling painting, this other way of thinking of variation and eye flow and
Mhm.
visual energy allows for way more intuitive response. I can make
Yeah.
anything work. I can slop paint on a canvas and turn it into a thing because I know how to move the eye. I
Right.
know how to create variation in space.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and now it's wired in. Every time I make a mark, I pick up a different brush. I load it differently. Every time I pick up a specific color, I'll shift it. And
Yeah.
even if it's one note, I don't even consciously do it now. It's intuitive.
Now we're all going to go look at all your work and we're
Yeah.
going to analyze it. So
Yeah.
that's great.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow. One of the quotes from your book that I wrote down that I wanted to bring up, and I think it relates to this, is I think it's on page 166. One form of resistance is preciousness.
Oh God, yeah. Well,
And
that's common.
fear
Yeah.
of screwing up, the work isn't precious, the intent is.
Yeah.
Really speaks to me. And I think that I know for myself and friends, when we're out painting, we're painting together, there's always that moment when you've got the block in and you're in love. You're in love with your painting. And so, oh my gosh, now what, and there's always the friend that says, oh, stop right there. But you don't want to, you got another hour, you got to paint. And that's where fear sets in for me. And so one thing that I've started doing, and maybe you do it as well, is I set aside specific time in my studio just for experimentation.
Yep.
And I think that's a real important exercise. And oftentimes it's on top of older work that almost was okay. Maybe there's something I liked about it and I hung on to it, but I break out some old pieces and I just, what's wrong with pink trees? I'm going to make these trees pink or whatever, and just start playing with color and playing with shapes. And I think that's, for me, that's been very, very helpful.
Yeah.
Do you have any other advice for people?
Oh yeah, sure. Well, one of the things that happens, and I went through this phase too, in the plein air. I mean, I started painting outside in 1984. And no one taught me how to do nothing. Everything I know about painting, I just picked it up, figured it out, every medium, And so I went out in the field and I don't even know where I got a French easel back in 1984, but I found one at the local art store, I guess. And started painting outside. And you go through this phase of like, okay, how do I make a tree look like a tree? And why does this not convincing? And you have to go through this learning phase. Where people screw up in painting, I don't care what they're painting, is they fall in love with the parts,
Yeah.
right? They,
I,
they fall in love with the tree that they just painted, and they become so fixated on that that they're not considering the whole. And maybe if you consider the whole, you go, well, that tree doesn't really serve the whole, which means maybe I'll just scrape that down a hair, but nobody wants to do that. But I can tell you from painting and teaching abstract, the process of destruction and rebuilding is vital. Like you're not going to get a good abstract painting by carefully drawing it out and hand coloring each piece. That's not the way it works. And painting, even in the figure, or certainly in the landscape, you can include this process of if things get way better. And Kwang Ho, he's a great example of that. Years ago, he posted this thing about he did this huge painting and it wasn't working well. He got mad at it. And this is a great place to be when you get mad at it. If it's not working, just wipe it down. And the stuff that had sort of set in stayed. And he went, huh. And he started rebuilding it based on that, what was left. And like building a new civilization on top of the old civilization. And that's great. Consider the whole. Like I always say, the only thing that is precious is the intent. What were you after in the beginning? Because that guides every decision. You know?
Yeah.
And don't be afraid of, I mean, it's freeing. And because the paintings can take over you, take the power, right? And you just go, screw you. You're not the boss of me. I gave birth to
That's
you.
right.
You
I
out.
say that all the time. You're not the boss of
Yes,
me. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
right.
I'm in charge here.
Yeah.
Larry, this
Pay
has been
attention to
great.
how you're thinking about what you're doing, right?
Right.
If you're petting something, if the hand is moving and the brain's not engaged, you're going to screw something up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have a reason for everything you do.
Yeah. It'll end up looking like anything else and everything else out there. So
Yeah. And the ultimate thing is, and I said this at Pace, don't assume that you're wrong, right? And what I mean by that is you look at everybody else doing another thing
yeah.
and you go, well, maybe I'm not doing it right. Right. Now, don't get me wrong. As I said, at Pace, it's not a hall pass to do bad work. You still have to go through the process of learning how to do things right before you choose to do them wrong.
Well said.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah.
Larry, I'm going to stop here because I want to make sure there's plenty of time for the attendee to ask some questions. And I know you're going to be there live. And
Well, I'll even wear the same shirt. How about that? So it looks like time.
only if you want to.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. This has been wonderful. We so appreciate you and look forward to, do you have a name for your new book?
I have 27 new names for the book.
Okay. Well, we look forward to
It's
hearing
almost
more.
done. I got another couple of months on it.
Okay. Well, we look forward to hearing more about it. And again, thank you so much. We sure appreciate you.
Right. Same right back at you, Brenda.
Okay. Bye, Larry.
Peace.
Okay, Lindsay, if we can get Larry on here on Zoom so we can kind of talk back and forth a little bit, we can do a Q&A session. For the in-person attendees, what we'll do is you'll ask the question, then I'll repeat it. That way it gets on the video, and plus Larry can't hear it unless it comes through this microphone. So for Zoom attendees, have to be careful with the mute, but you can unmute and ask a question, but wait until I ask for questions from the Zoom attendees. The other way you can do it on Zoom, that may be a little easier for the Zoom attendees, is to ask the question in chat. And then that can get passed on down here as well. So.
Can he see us?
He can't see us, no.
We're waving.
He can pretend to see us. Are you there, Larry?
I'm here.
There you go.
I can't see anybody.
Yeah, well, you
I
can.
see one person. I see Judy Evans.
Okay, there you go. You're looking in the right direction because you're looking down toward where I am. So that's that'll work good. There you go.
I see you.
Has anybody ever seen the painting that's up in, or was up in there? I think it still is. of the gun pointed straight out the camera? And
I have.
anywhere you walk in front of that gun, it looks like it's pointed right at you. So I guess Larry could do that on the screen.
I could.
You have any closing comments now that you've seen the video? Anything that you wanted to say that you didn't get to say in the video?
Oh, no. I mean, I'm just going to open it up to questions if anybody has any.
Okay. I know there was one question earlier about what media do you normally use?
Well,
not just normally, what media do you use, period?
Well, as you mentioned earlier, I worked extensively in all of them. Maybe I haven't done any egg tempera or scrimshaw, but I've done I worked in oil since God knows some late in the last century, maybe 1990. I've worked in acrylic forever, a pastel for 25 years, airbrush when I was doing surfboards and stuff. And gouache, and then a few others weird things because I was an illustrator, and sometimes one medium wouldn't do it, so I would just lie and say I know how to do scratchboard, and then I'd buy some and figure it out. And my favorite study medium, plein air medium. I used to travel with oil because that's what's you get used to it, but it's so cumbersome, and then you always have to worry about the airlines picking it up, and then there's the thinner, and so then I switched to gouache as a travel and study medium, and I love it. It's actually altered the way I paint because of the nature of it, the medium. It's really travelable. In the studios, when I'm doing large work, I will mostly work in oil. If I'm incorporating collage, I'll do the ground and acrylic and then seal it and put oil on top. So it really depends. I'm doing a lot of different things because I'm kind of having the time of my life exploring and trying new ideas. And I just picked the medium best suited for that. Airbrush is gone. I don't do that anymore. It's a pain in the butt.
Yeah, I know a lot of the artists in the museum here started out as illustrators,
Yes,
and
that's right.
they
Yes.
they used a variety of media too.
Yeah.
Howard Turkney.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of great artists that are known for their illustration work. Dean Cornwell, who he did his own stuff too. Really, again, went real crazy at the end in a good way, and maybe a little bit mentally, but it's another story. But he's such a great designer as an illustrator, fantastic painter, everything across. He ticked off all the boxes. So many of them. I could bore you with names for hours, but I won't.
There you go. Your painting of the messy studio, that really made me feel good.
Oh, good.
I
Because you have
tend
a
to be
messy
a
studio?
I have a very messy studio.
Yeah.
Order out of chaos, I think, is a term you used at one point. What's your studio look like?
Well, it's a walk-in studio. It's in Charleston, and I share it with another artist. And so we have to contain it to a certain degree. So it's pretty organized, but it's way cleaner than my living space. I'll tell you that. I have stuff everywhere because I do like chaos when I write. I write better when I have a lot of things around me for inspiration. And I like to write a lot. So, but yeah, it could be cleaner, but then I would worry about my mental health if it was like everything in its place. So,
Yeah, I know I get very uncomfortable if the space is too clean and too neat.
yeah,
I
I
have
don't
to
trust that
mess
kind
it
of
up a
person.
little bit. Does anybody in
Right.
the in-person audience have a question at all? We're answering everything, looks like.
Is that it? Well, that was easy.
What's in the books, is that done in gouache?
The question is the work that you put in your book, is that done in gouache?
Oh, it's a mixture, gouache or oil mostly, probably some acrylic stuff. There's probably one piece in there that I did with house paint, of all things, because I've I've had a collection of house paint samples from a furniture project or something or another, and thought, oh, this would be a fun challenge to paint something with these random colors. And I love the sloppiness of it. It's not archival, and I mean, it's archival enough that it will last until I'm gone, but I can't vouch for it after that. So whenever I want that feel, which I love, the house paint feel, I will make my own out of gesso and acrylic tints, and I get the same sort of goopy paint feel.
Yeah, I've experimented some with making different types of paint, oil paint, egg tempera, and so on. It's interesting to try to do something like that.
Right.
What started him with doing the book work?
Okay, the question is, what started you on doing books, writing books?
Well, that's a great question, and I ask myself that all the time because why take on a project that like that at all? I started teaching in 19 workshops in 1990, believe it or not, and then I decided to start teaching at a college level because I felt like I had something to give the students. I had by that time 10, 15 years of professional experience. And I realized when I joined the staff as an adjunct teacher the local college in Orlando that no one was teaching creative process, how to think. It's just not, it wasn't taught to me in college. It's not taught to them. So I developed a class called creative thinking, and which means I had to develop the curriculum for it. There was no book. And that was sort of the prerequisite for my actually my second book, technically, Fishing for Elephants. And then I realized when I finished, that took me 2.5 years to write and produce. And then I realized I'm not done. There's actually a lot more. And it's like it's a rabbit hole. The more you go into the rabbit hole, the bigger it gets, and the more you see and all that. So I don't know why I'm compelled to do it, but I like writing and figuring out things for myself. I learn as much. Any of you who are teachers know that you learn by through teaching as much by doing because you have to quantify and learn how to explain things in the simplest of terms. So you end up boiling everything down to understandable chunks, hopefully, if you're a good teacher. And so I'm three quarters, 7/8 of the way done with the next book.
Yeah, I think the Design Unchained, I think that's a good title for that.
Mhm.
If you want
Yeah.
my opinion on titles.
All right. Noted.
Any, any other questions right now? Okay.
Online question, what is the ratio of the study that you do before you paint compared to the actual painting of the size?
Okay. What proportion of time do you spend before you paint, preparing to do the painting and then actually painting it? Sketches, that sort of thing.
That's a great question. And that depends on what I'm tackling. Um, if it's the animals and spaces, which you showed some of those, a lot of times I just, when you're a plein air painter, there's kind of a system that you learn, especially if you're in the competitions a lot, in order to make your success rate greater. I would go out in the field and I do plenty of small studies, and now gouache would be my study medium for that. And then so that there's that in a sense prep time, and the creative process kind of has taught me that the more ideas I have, the better. And they don't have to be fancy. They don't have to be thought out. Just unusual, quick sketches where I'm trying something a little different will inspire some idea. And that's enough now because I've been doing this for so long that I can build from that. But if I'm trying to, like in a quick draw, I will do pre-sketches. I will do a drawing with a brush, and then I'll do a value block in, and while that's flashing off, I'll mix all the colors in advance. So then it's painting. I got an hour and a half to paint. In studio, if it's abstract, there's no studies you can do. You just start throwing down stuff and building layers and so forth. If it's an animal in a space, I used to do gouache studies. and to figure them out in advance. But now I don't really have to do that. If Yeah, so once in a while I'll use a Photoshop thing to get the light sources to match up, but I don't really have to do that now either. So at some point you get sort of used to piecing things together in a way that satisfies the vision.
Okay. Lindsay, I think there was an online question.
Yeah, the question was around wearing eyeglasses while painting, if he experienced any kind of eye strain or issues, and if so, does he have any remedies or tips on how to help that?
Okay, the online viewer noticed that you wear glasses
Yes.
and wanted to know if you have any problems with eye strain
Oh,
because
God.
of that, and what do you do about it?
Yeah. When as much as I love doing more rendered things, they're very difficult. So these glasses that you're seeing, they're bifocals, and I told the eye doctor that I wanted two focal lengths. One of them at arm's length plus a brush. Believe it or not, they can do that so that I can stand back and see the painting in sharp focus. And then one that where I'm about this close to the painting so I can see detail. And if I want to get back, I just take them off. But everything's really super fuzzy right now, and I just try and not abuse them and take them off from time to time. But this bifocal thing, they're painting glasses, so arm's length and then up close for detail for like eyelashes and spots and feathers and stuff. I don't like detail now as much because it hurts my eyeballs, but I'll do it. Whatever the project calls for, I'll do.
Um, okay, you talked about taking them off, and that makes everything fuzzy. Do you do that instead of there you go. Do you do
Yeah.
that instead of going back 8 or 10 feet, or do you do?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. You can just I can step back at arm's length, take them off, and I'm not focused on details. I'm seeing the bigger masses and the
Hmm.
shape configurations, and I can still test like eye flow. That thing about eye flow is how I assess every painting, the ones I've done and the ones that anyone else has done. And that's like my litmus test, not things like center of interest, rule of thirds, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I believe you said that in the beginning of your video that all those rules are really just suggestions.
Yeah, and they're good suggestions. I'm not dissing them. I'm just saying at some point, for beginners, they're good to know. But the center of interest one always bugs me. It's it's when you're just beginning, that's a good thing to know because you need to have in a sea of chaos, you have to have one thing to pull the eye. But the really great painters, there's multiple levels of things, of points of interest, and that's what keeps the viewer, if you've ever noticed, either yourself or someone else staring at a painting for 30 minutes, they're locked in because they're why am I locked into this painting? Because they're using these little eye flow mechanisms to keep you engaged. They're just hard to spot until you know how to see them.
Okay, one more question over here.
How do you keep from getting tight, especially when you're doing detail, and then how do you decide how and when to use that to the effectiveness of the painting?
Okay, the question is, how do you keep from getting tight in your painting, especially when you're painting detail? And how do you use that in your painting? Is that a fair roof? Okay.
Yeah. I learned a trick from Sargent. Um, yeah, because we went to high school together. And when you look at his work, one of the things I noticed in all of his work, and especially his portraiture, is that he painted in effect the way the eye sees. That is, whatever you're looking at is in focus, and everything else is a gesture. So if you look at everything's perfectly drawn, but the face is really super tight. The hands are tight, and any trinkets and gizmos that he wants you to see, he puts in the sharp focus, and everything else is a gesture, or blended out in effect. But he's more like a gesture painter. And so once I realized he also does that in his watercolors. It's a lot of vague information but where he wants you to be, that gets put into sharp focus. And so I use that. And for those of you just starting out or in the middle intermediate stage of painting everything in focus, because that's what's in your iPhone shot, that's not how the eye sees. And so if you want something that's a little more natural to that and more inviting to the eye, then you can soften some edges or use more gesture and train yourself to get focused areas of focus of points of interest throughout a painting, if that makes sense. And that's usually, to be on, there's one of the components of painting is edge. And that means a sharp edge pulls the eye, it comes forward, and a soft edge recedes. Go look through any Sargent painting, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Okay. Back to your book.
Yes,
You got, I think you said you had 2 or 3 months left in the writing. Does the
yes.
publisher have a schedule for when it's actually going
No,
to be out on the?
no, it's a good question. And I realized early on that I wanted to do something that didn't get, what's the word? Turned into a product, and I didn't want a title like 7 creative ways to improve your painting. I just wanted to write exactly the way I wanted to write. I wanted exactly the exercises that I wanted to have. And so I knew that I had to control the whole thing. And so I did it online. I wrote the whole thing. I found a really good editor who helped me a lot in my writing. And then I hired a good designer to lay out the thing, but I had full control. And I'll take that over. And as it turns out, I did way better than I would have had I gone to a publisher. The book is on Amazon and it's $45. And some go, well, that's a lot of money. Well, they take $38 of it. Now it's less. They adjust the price. But I still get, like $6 to $7 a book or $4 a book or whatever, as opposed to publishers who have to make a huge chunk of money and then you get 10% of resale pricing, and it's not much. And so I just decided to do it myself. And it's more satisfying. And I sold quite a number of books. And the next one, hopefully, I'll do the same.
It seems to be very popular. A lot of the artists that I know that have it just rave about it. So, is that
Yeah, because no one teaches this stuff.
Yeah, they don't.
I do.
Is that the Amazon print on demand, or is that?
Yeah, on Amazon. At the time, it's called Create Space. But
Okay.
now they have it. You can use them. They have a whole service team. But my next one, I'm going to hire the best designer I know, and I'm going to make it a really beautiful thing to look at. I mean, my last book was it was a workbook, and this one will be less a workbook and more informational and deeper level. The kinds of things I just talked about will be in that book.
Is it how does it tie in with fishing for elephants? Is it a
It's an
sequel or
extension. I would
extension? Okay.
consider that one Creativity 101 for artists and really anyone. And this one is a more advanced, a higher level of thinking, a deeper level of thinking for painters. And I try and keep it pretty broad, not in the way that Rick Rubin did in his book, The Creative Act, but the wording is, I focus towards painters, but not exclusive to.
Okay, I should say that we need to buy Fishing for Elephants first and then buy your new one. But is that the best way to go? To go ahead and go through Fishing for Elephants first and then?
I mean, I would say yes, because it's a year's worth of exercises. There are 150 exercises in the book. And it's fun to look at the pictures and even read the words, but you do have to do the exercises and just pick the ones that you think are more important to you at this whatever time. But I cover it all. I cover the psychology of it. I cover a creative process that I use as a graphic designer, as a creative in the visual arts, art director, illustrator. and it's all stuff that I don't know is taught anywhere, to be honest. I don't know who writes about it.
So to get the most out of both books, you really have to not just read it, but actually do the exercises.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of the way it works. It's like sitting in a lecture and watching a demo. You don't get that much. You'll get two things.
Yeah.
You know, you have to go right there, right afterwards, and put it to work.
Okay, I don't think I mentioned this to the people, the audience before, but Larry is right in the middle of doing a workshop up in Nashville.
Yeah,
And
just finished.
we need to talk to him about that. We'll get Kent to get in touch with you about doing a workshop here.
Yeah,
But
I
it
love
started
teaching.
yesterday and goes through Saturday.
That's right,
And
4 day.
so he's been very busy. I think the workshop ended about 30 minutes before the
Yeah,
meeting started,
yes, I'm gonna go crash.
and he had to he had to go find an internet connection to get on with us on Zoom. So he's been pretty busy.
Yeah, I'll do.
But speaking of workshops, this particular workshop I think was on creativity in
It isn't,
Nashville.
yeah,
Is that
it
right?
is. This one's called abstraction from nature,
Okay,
and it's
abstraction
how
from
to interpret from it's how to design something and have your way with what you're seeing, rather than how to copy what you see.
okay. And I think from your website, I saw that I guess most of your workshops, the in-person workshops, are abstraction. You have a video on the creative
Right.
process, don't
Yeah.
you?
Yes, I do, through Streamline. Thanks for bringing that up.
Streamline, yeah.
Through PaintTube, and it's called the Creative Course or the Creativity Course. And one of my premise with that one was to show the idea of taking one source, one piece of reference, and interpreting it as many ways as I could. And I did 30 different paintings, changing up the components of shape, line, edge, color in each one to show how to do that, how to think about it. It's a good video. It's 6 hours. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like it is a good one. And Streamline's a good publisher too for the
Yep.
videos. I
Yeah,
got
they are.
quite a few of theirs.
Mhm.
What I want to see though is the one on Olympic speed knitting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are
If you
some
look at his
secrets I can't
website, you'll know what
reveal.
I'm talking about. But
Yeah. I can't share my secrets there because the team is
there you
sacred.
go.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions here? I'm about to run out.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Larry's website is www.larrymorestudios.com. Very easy to remember.
Yes.
Um, and
Put that on the Facebook thing.
yeah, we'll try to get that into Facebook. What we'll do, Larry, is post a little report on this particular meeting, and we'll put the website on the Facebook post.
Grand.
A reminder for the members of the guild: we do not have a meeting in July. Our next meeting will be in August. I think it's August the 8th, second Thursday of each month. One other announcement here. I meant to mention this before at the beginning. Starting in, I believe it's September, the second Thursday of each month when we have our meeting is going to be a free day at the Booth Museum. No charges to get in all day. They've been having free Thursdays, and I think the rest of them are going to go away. So that's only going to be on the Thursday of our meeting.
He's probably ready to go crash.
Yeah, he probably is ready. I'm not going to take but a minute. The comment was you were probably ready to go crash, so they're trying to get me to hush here. That'll be a good opportunity for you to invite friends and family and come early, because they can come and they don't have to pay anything to get in. They can go around the museum. Larry, do you have any closing comments at this point? or have we covered everything?
I covered all the questions and just get out there and do it and do lots of small studies. That's what I like to say. Just explore, try different things. Don't rely on how other people do things. Take it into consideration, but find your own way. That's what I teach.
Small study is an experiment.
Yep.
Okay, Larry, well, we sure do appreciate your time today. We spent some time with him last week to make the video. Brenda really wanted to be here tonight, but her best friend that I think she calls him a brother from another mother. He's having an opening tonight, and so she felt like she had to be there. But so she was able to attend by a pre-recorded video. So, okay, with that, we'll close. We've got until 8 o'clock, and the museum closes at 8 o'clock. So I would encourage everybody to socialize a bit, get together out in the hall, and maybe look around at some of the paintings in the museum. And Larry, we'll let you go and let you go crash.
All right.
And we
Thanks.
really appreciate the time.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we'll close now.
Will this be posted on Facebook and or possibly YouTube?
Appreciate all the questions.
I got a question for you.
You got to go crash too, huh?
It's on YouTube now. I'm not sure if they're going to put it on Facebook or not.
Perfect, thank you.
No problem.
She said she looked to see if there was a way to do it. She didn't know, so.
Yeah, I can't remember now precisely how to do it.
Okay. I will have her get in touch with you directly then.
Yeah, if you could.
She's just took a